were in elementary school, did you ever get paddled in the principal's office? It happened to me one time. I and one of my good buddies, we were discovered stealing Hershey bars from the checkout lanes of the local supermarket. We thought we'd gotten away with it. But about 3 days after our theft, we were summoned to the principal's office. And there were a couple of, honest-to-God, plainclothes detectives from the Toledo Police Department sitting in the office waiting for us, along with the principal. There were no counselors back then. And the principal said, Mike and Jerry, these gentlemen are here for a very important reason. And then they told the two of us, that they knew we had stolen candy bars. And then there was the usual question, why did you do it? What made you commit theft? Do you realize what you were doing? I mean, we committed a very cardinal sin. It was like in the 1950s, mid-1950s, I think, or early 1950s, and we had stolen things. We had stolen from the capitalist system. No, seriously. Now, aside from the fact, I'm being kind of sarcastic right now, but aside from all that, the candy bars weren't ours to take, obviously, and we committed a crime, shoplifting. So we got a lecture by the two detectives, and then they said they had made a decision not to pursue the supermarket, did not want to pursue this. They wanted to write it off as young boy bullshit, and they weren't going to pursue it, but they expected that the police would give us a very strong warning, which they did. And then they left. And then the principal, Miss Partridge, told us that we were both going to have to suffer corporal punishment. And she said, which one of you wants to go first? Well, I went first. Went into a second office off of her main office, and I had to bend over. Yes, I did. And grab my ankles. Yes, I did. And she had what looked like half of a canoe paddle. Yes, it was. And I got 3 solid whacks on my tender young boy ass, and it hurt. End of story. That was Jerry went in. He got his too. And when he came out, we were in the hallway and we kind of laughed at what we had just experienced as if, hey, no big deal. Ha, 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 ha. No big deal. Yes, it was a big deal. And I remember feeling extremely angry about the whole thing. But what could I do? I mean, we had done something to deserve it. Now, I wasn't a stranger to corporal punishment. My grandmother, I've said before, when I got out of line, when I stayed with her, it was go to the mulberry bush with a paring knife and cut a switch, which was then used on me, right? Judiciously, but used nonetheless. But that was 1,000 years ago. Now, a Missouri school district announced that it's bringing back paddling. And that announcement, this was, I think, Friday. This drew a lot of attention. But in a large number of schools in this country, and I didn't know this, corporal punishment never went away. It remains legal to strike a child in 19 states, mostly here in the South, of course, the Christian terrorist South, absolutely. And this is in spite of efforts to try to get rid of it. Now, the numbers have declined in the past decade, but what I have here from the New York Times, about 70,000 public school children were subjected to corporal punishment in the 2017-2018 school year. That's the most recent year which this federal data is available. And nearly 4,000 schools reported using corporal punishment during that school year. A person named Morgan Craven, I assume it's a woman, National Director for Policy Advocacy and Community Engagement at the Intercultural Development Research Association, which supports a federal ban on corporal punishment in schools, said, quote, "It's just a really, really disturbing practice that some districts just continue to hang on to," end quote. And see, I completely agree with this. I don't remember my total reaction all those decades ago. I just know I felt humiliated. And I guess a part of me felt relieved because I was looking at, Jerry and I were looking on the one hand at going to jail, a juvenile delinquent, what do they call it? Juvenile detention or whatever. And we knew from stories among the neighborhood kids that if you go into juvenile detention, the worst thing in the world would happen to you, whatever that was. So given the choice of that and a couple of whacks on the ass, I guess the choice had been given to us would have been, yeah, we'll take the whacks on the ass. But anyway, this practice, corporal punishment, it's defined as paddling, spanking, or other forms of physical discipline. And it's back in the news when the school district in Cassville, which is a small city in southwestern Missouri, decided to reinstate hitting children, which is a practice it stopped in 2001. That's according to a Springfield, Missouri newspaper. And corporal punishment, according to what this school district has decided, will be used only with the parent's permission and, quote, only when all other alternative means of discipline have failed, and then only in reasonable form and upon the recommendation of the principal, end quote. That's the district's new policy. Now, according to the Springfield newspaper, this was put back in place in response to requests from parents. That's according to the school superintendent, Merlin Johnson. Merlin told the paper, quote, we've had people actually thank us for it. Surprisingly, those on social media would probably be appalled to hear us say these things, but the majority of people that I've run into have been supportive, end quote. People thank you for it? Thank you for beating my child. I know. They wouldn't use the term beat, would they? Spank, discipline, whatever. Now, if an adult, principal or counselor, somebody, were to hit another kid with a wooden board, and I'm sorry, not another kid, but if an adult were to take a wooden board and hit another adult, that would be considered assault. And depending on some conditions, it might be even assault with a deadly weapon. Now, as a professor of human development pointed out from the University of Texas at Austin, quote, but when the teacher hits a smaller person who happens to be a child, these states and these schools are saying, it's okay. It's showing we give children less protection against violence than we give adults, end quote. Now, you could probably guess, and I support this, the American Psychological Association has opposed corporal punishment in schools for the past 50 years. And the APA argues, and you don't have to be a genius to agree with this, that paddling or hitting or beating can cause injury and trauma, physical injury, physical trauma, but also it can cause emotional problems, and it's not effective at improving behavior. To the contrary, kids become more aggressive and disruptive the more frequently they're subjected to physical punishment. That's according to the American Psychological Association. And then there's this. Very simply, there's research showing that black students and students with disabilities are more likely to be paddled in school than their peers. Black students make up 15% of the public school population in the United States, 15%. But they make up almost 40% of the students subjected to corporal punishment, according to the APA. And children with disabilities make up 21% of all instances of corporal punishment, but they're only 17% of the student population. So once again, this horrible imbalance. Is corporal punishment then inherently unfair, prejudiced, bigoted? Yes, says Mike Malloy. Well, something to think about. Corporal punishment, I had no idea it was still in effect in 19 states in this country. Unbelievable. Well, when the Christian terrorists finally take over, it won't be available in 19 states. It'll be available in 50. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.